The planet was wrapped in endless storms. Snow fell from a dark sky that had not seen sunlight for many years. The wind howled like a living thing, covering the broken land with layers of ice. Among the frozen plains, an alien mother named Sira struggled to stay alive. Her body was weak, her hands shaking as she held her small baby close to her chest. The child was the last light of her life, and she would not let the storm take it away without a fight. Sira and her baby were hiding in a small cave made of ice and stone. Inside, a single glowing crystal gave off a faint blue light. It was the only thing keeping them warm. The crystal was old and almost out of power. Sira knew it would not last through the night. She wrapped her baby in layers of cloth, torn from her own clothing, and pressed her child close to her heart. The baby let out a weak cry, too tired even to shiver. Sira began to hum softly, her voice trembling in the cold air. She sang an ancient song, a lullaby her mother had once sung to her long ago. The melody spoke of warm winds, bright days, and soft rain that fed green fields. Sira remembered those times faintly, like a dream fading away. Her people had once lived in shining cities made of crystal and light. They sang songs of joy, not sorrow. But that was before the war, before the sky broke and the sun vanished behind endless clouds. Now only ruins remained. Many of her kind had already fallen to the cold. Sira had searched for others, walking across the snow for days but found nothing but silence. Every step had been harder than the last. Her strength was fading, yet she could not give up, not while her baby still breathed. The storm outside screamed, shaking the cave, but she kept singing, hoping her child would stay calm. Her voice echoed weakly off the ice walls. She looked down at her child and whispered softly, "Sleep, my little star. Mama is here." The baby's small eyes blinked open for a moment, then closed again. The faint warmth of the crystal flickered like a candle. Sira reached out a trembling hand to touch it, but it gave no more heat. She knew when it went dark, the cold would come for them both. She thought about her mate who had gone out days ago to find food. He never returned. She tried not to think of what might have happened to him. Every thought of loss made her chest ache, but she pushed it away. There was only her and her baby now. That was all that mattered. The blizzard roared louder. Snow blew into the cave entrance, covering the floor with white dust. Sira used her body to block the wind, curling herself around her child. Her skin burned from the cold, but she did not move. She would endure anything to keep her baby alive a little longer. Her mind drifted as she sang. She imagined a world where the sky was blue again, where her child could grow strong and run through fields without fear. She wanted to believe that somewhere beyond the storm there was still life, still warmth, still hope. But her heart knew the truth. They were alone on a dying world. A tear froze on her cheek as it fell. Her voice grew softer with each verse until it was only a whisper. The wind howled outside, but within the cave the only sound was a fading lullaby, the last gift of a mother to her child. Then, through the storm, something strange happened. For a moment she thought she heard another sound, a low hum, distant and steady, unlike the wind. Her eyes opened slightly. It was faint, almost lost beneath the noise of the blizzard. She tried to listen, but the sound faded away again. Maybe it was only her tired mind playing tricks. Still, the sound had felt different, warm, alive. For the first time in days, a small spark of curiosity touched her heart. She looked toward the mouth of the cave where the snow whirled like white smoke. The storm raged harder, but deep within it, far away, something was moving. She could not see it, but she felt it. A rhythm in the snow, a pulse of life cutting through the frozen silence. Sira did not know what it was. Maybe hope, maybe help, or maybe nothing at all. Yet even as her body grew heavy, even as her eyelids fell shut, she found herself whispering one last line of her song. Not for farewell this time, but for a chance. Her baby made a soft sound, tiny hands curling against her chest. Sira smiled weakly, tears frozen to her face. Outside, the storm howled on, wild and merciless, but deep in its heart, something unseen pressed forward. A step, a light, a promise. She did not know it yet. But through the endless snow, a stranger was coming, and with him, warmth would return to the cold world that had long forgotten it. High above the frozen world, a lone human ship moved through the dark sky. The ship was small, made for travel and rescue, not for battle. Inside it, Captain Elias Ward sat in silence, watching the planet spin slowly beneath him. His sensors showed endless storms, powerful enough to tear apart machines. Most explorers would have stayed away, but Elias had noticed something strange. A weak, broken signal hidden under the storm's static. It was not human. The tone, the pattern, the rhythm, and all were unfamiliar. It sounded like a call for help, but one buried deep under layers of interference. He tried to ignore it at first. Many old planets sent random signals long after they were dead. Sometimes it was only machines talking to the wind, but this one felt different. It came in short, fading bursts, as if someone was trying again and again to reach anyone who might listen. Elias had traveled through many empty worlds before. He had seen ruins, wrecks, and graves of old civilizations. Sometimes he wondered if anyone remembered them. Perhaps this signal was just another ghost. Still, something in his heart refused to let it go. He could not ignore it. Humans had crossed the stars to seek life, not to turn away from it. He set the ship's course toward the frozen planet. His computer warned him about dangerous weather, low visibility, and freezing temperatures. "I know," he muttered under his breath, switching off the alert. The ship began to descend through the thick clouds, shaking as the storm struck its hull. Ice formed quickly on the windows. The sky turned into a wall of white. Inside the cockpit, red lights flashed. The ship's AI voice said calmly, "Warning, atmospheric interference, navigation unstable." Elias gritted his teeth. "We'll manage." He had flown through worse. At least he thought he had. After several long minutes, the ship finally broke through the lowest layer of the storm. Below lay an endless field of snow and ice, broken only by sharp ridges and deep cracks. The planet looked silent and dead, a graveyard made of frost. Yet his scanner showed a faint signal near the northern range. It was weak but alive. Elias put on his heavy exosuit. The armor was thick, built for freezing worlds. He checked the oxygen, heater, and light systems twice. He attached a pack filled with emergency supplies, energy cells, and food rations. Then he took a deep breath and opened the airlock. The moment he stepped outside, the storm hit him with full force. Wind slammed against his body like a hammer. Ice dust cut across his visor, making it hard to see. He had to push each step forward with effort. His boots sank into the snow, leaving deep prints that the wind quickly began to erase. The suit's internal temperature dropped rapidly. He increased power to the heater. His breath came out in clouds that fogged the helmet for a second before clearing. In his ear, his radio crackled with the sound of static. Somewhere beyond the noise, he could still hear the faint signal, one steady pulse every few seconds. It guided him forward through the endless white. Minutes turned into hours. The snowstorm never rested. It swallowed sound, light, and time. Elias could not tell if he was walking in circles. He checked his compass again and again, trusting the faint digital arrow that led him deeper into the storm. At one point he saw shadows in the distance, shapes that looked like towers or walls. But when he came closer, they were only frozen rocks covered in ice. His heart sank a little. He was beginning to wonder if he was chasing an echo. Then, just as his power levels dropped to half, something changed. His scanner beeped sharply. A heat signature appeared, and small, faint but real. He froze in place. It was less than 200 meters ahead. Someone was there. He forced his way forward, fighting the wind. His legs ached, but he did not stop. The signal grew stronger. The snow grew deeper. Each step felt heavier than the last. Still, he pressed on. Finally, through the white mist, he saw a dark shape, a low opening in the side of an icy ridge. A cave. The faint light from inside flickered weakly, as if struggling to stay alive. Elias approached carefully, lowering his weapon. His breath quickened. He did not know what kind of creature he might find here, but whatever it was in trouble. He reached the entrance and looked in. His helmet light fell on two shapes, one large and still, the other small and curled close beside it. He froze. It was not a trick of the storm. There was life inside. The larger figure was kneeling, arms wrapped protectively around the smaller one. Their skin was pale, almost glowing, their form delicate and strange. The smaller one, a child, barely moved, weak and quiet. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had seen too many deaths in frozen places. Not again. He took a careful step forward, his voice calm and soft. "It's all right," he said, though he knew they could not understand. "I'm here to help." The mother lifted her head slightly, her eyes tired and full of fear. She looked at the tall figure of metal standing before her, glowing in the dim light. For a moment, neither moved. Only the storm outside filled the silence. In that instant, across species and language, they understood one another. One sought to give life. The other came to save it. And in the middle of a world of snow, two strangers met, drawn together by a signal of hope that refused to die. Inside the cave, silence filled the air except for the faint hum of the storm outside. The alien mother, Sira, blinked weakly as the tall human knelt before her. Her arms still wrapped tightly around her baby, who barely stirred. The strange being before her was unlike anything she had ever seen, covered in metal, glowing faintly from the lights on his suit. For a heartbeat, fear gripped her. She wondered if this was another spirit of the storm, come to take her child away. But then the figure moved slowly, carefully. He took something from a pack and placed it gently on the icy floor. A small sphere unfolded and began to glow warm orange. The air around it shimmered. Sira felt a wave of heat brush against her frozen skin. She gasped softly, pulling her baby closer as if to share the warmth. The human, Elias, saw the way her eyes widened. He spoke softly through his helmet, though he knew she could not understand. "It's heat. You're safe now." His voice was calm, deep, and gentle. The translator in his suit was useless for unknown languages, but tone could still bridge the gap. He pointed toward the heater, then pressed a hand to his chest. "Warmth," he said again. Sira stared for a long moment, then slowly extended one trembling hand toward the small flame. The warmth was real. She could feel life returning to her fingers. The baby whimpered, then gave a tiny sigh, curling closer to the heat. Tears filled her eyes. It was the first warmth she had felt in days. Elias watched quietly, his heart heavy. He could see how weak they were, skin pale, movements slow. The mother's breathing was shallow. His helmet readouts confirmed low body temperature and signs of exhaustion. If he had arrived a few hours later, they would not have survived. He knelt beside them, opening a packet of water. He poured a little into a small metal cap and pushed it gently toward her. Sira hesitated. She didn't understand his words, but she could feel no threat from him. The warmth, the calm movements, they spoke more clearly than any language. Slowly, she reached out and touched the cap. The liquid shimmered clear and clean. She brought it to her lips, tasting water for the first time in days. It felt like life itself. The baby stirred again, weakly reaching toward the human's light. Elias smiled beneath his helmet. The little one was curious despite the cold. He adjusted his suit's external lamp, making it shine softer. The baby blinked and reached again, a small sound escaping its lips. Not a cry, but something close to a laugh. That sound cut through the storm like sunlight through clouds. Sira's chest tightened. Her child was still alive, still strong enough to smile. She looked at the human again, her fear slowly melting away. She did not know who he was or why he had come, but she knew one thing. He had brought warmth. Elias tried to speak again. "I'm going to help you," he said slowly, pointing to the cave's entrance, then back to the sky. "My ship, warmth, food." He acted out flying motions with his hands, hoping she would understand. Sira watched him carefully. His gestures were strange, but his eyes, those human eyes behind the glass, were full of kindness. She followed the direction he pointed, then looked down at her baby. The thought of leaving the cave frightened her. Outside was only wind and death, but staying meant certain end. The human noticed her hesitation. He didn't rush her. Instead, he adjusted the heater closer, placing another pack near them. It opened into a small blanket made of reflective foil. He unfolded it and gently placed it over her shoulders. The material shimmered as it caught the heater's light. Sira shivered at first, but soon the warmth began to spread. For a while they sat in silence. Only the sound of the storm and the hum of the heater filled the cave. Elias took out a small scanner and waved it gently near the baby, checking vital signs. The readings were weak but stable. The little one would survive, and if they reached the ship soon. Sira leaned back against the cave wall, exhaustion pulling at her. But this time, when she closed her eyes, she did not feel the grip of despair. Instead, she felt warmth on her skin, the soft breath of her baby, and the steady presence of this strange being beside her. Her lips moved softly, whispering the lullaby again, the same song she had sung before. Only now her voice carried something new. It was not just sadness or farewell. It was hope. Elias listened quietly. He did not understand the words, but he felt their meaning. The melody was gentle, full of love, filled with life clinging to light. As she sang, he glanced at the heater's readout. The temperature inside the cave was slowly rising. They would make it through the next hour. He leaned against the wall beside her, his eyes never leaving the mother and child. "You're going to be all right," he whispered again, more to himself than to them. Outside, the wind howled against the rocks, but inside the cave, warmth glowed softly, wrapping around the three of them like a promise. And though none of them could understand each other's words, something deeper spoke between them, a silent bond that said one thing clear as light in the dark: they were no longer alone. The wind outside the cave continued to scream, shaking the ice walls and sending snow swirling through every crack. Elias knew they could not stay there for long. The small heater in his suit had bought them time, but not enough. The storm outside was relentless, and the cave offered only temporary protection. He looked at Sira and her baby. Both were weak, shivering despite the warmth he had brought. He had to get them to the ship, and he fast. Sira clutched her child tightly, fear and hesitation written across her face. The thought of leaving the cave terrified her. Outside was nothing but ice, snow, and wind strong enough to tear flesh from bone. But she could feel the human's determination. His movements were careful, calm, but firm. There was no panic in him. He was a protector, and she could sense it. Slowly she nodded. She would follow him even into the storm. Elias adjusted his pack and motioned for her to hold onto his arm. He activated a portable tether, a thin beam of energy that could guide them and provide a small shield against the wind. It would not last long in a full blizzard, but it was enough to prevent the worst of the cold from touching them. Sira wrapped her arms around her baby, pressing it close to her chest. The child's small face peeked out from the blankets, eyes wide and curious despite exhaustion. Step by step, they left the safety of the cave. The storm hit them like a wall. Snow whipped around their faces, visibility dropped to almost nothing, and each footstep was a battle against the deep drifts. Elias led, placing his feet carefully, testing the snow for weak points and hidden cracks. Behind him, Sira struggled to keep pace, her small legs sinking into the frozen snow. Every now and then, he would pause and support her, holding the tether tight so she would not fall. Hours passed, though time seemed to stretch endlessly. The storm's roar never let up. The snow covered their tracks almost as soon as they made them, erasing evidence that they had ever been there. Elias could feel the strain in his muscles, the cold gnawing at his suit despite the heating system, but he did not slow down. He knew the baby's survival depended on it. Sira's voice was soft, barely audible over the storm. She began to hum again, the lullaby she had sung inside the cave. The sound was faint, carried only in her thoughts, but it gave a rhythm to their journey. Elias noticed the small sounds and smiled under his helmet. Somehow the song seemed to push them forward, giving strength where the storm tried to take it away. At one point, they came to a ridge. The wind was strongest there, threatening to push them off balance. Elias crouched low, pressing against the ground and pulling Sira close. The baby stirred, small hands reaching out instinctively. Elias whispered reassuring words, though she could not understand. His presence, steady and strong, was enough. Slowly, carefully, he guided them over the ridge. Below the ridge, they saw a faint light. Elias's heart leapt. It was the ship, small but glowing against the white world. The engines hummed softly, cutting through the storm. It was their destination, the only place that offered real warmth and safety. But they were still far. The wind whipped against them, snow stung their eyes, and each step became more difficult. Sira's strength was fading. She stumbled several times, almost falling, but Elias caught her each time. Her arms were sore, her body trembling, but she held the baby tightly, refusing to let go. She felt the human support beneath her, steady and reliable. She did not know his name, but she knew he would not leave them behind. Somehow, in the middle of a frozen wasteland, she trusted him completely. Finally, they reached the edge of the ship's landing platform. Elias activated a protective field around the platform, pushing back the snow and wind for a small, safe space. He guided Sira onto it first, then helped her place the baby inside a warming pod designed for fragile life forms. The pod glowed softly, blankets inside radiating heat. The child stirred, weakly opening its eyes, and a tiny cry escaped, not of fear but of relief. Sira knelt beside the pod, pressing her hand to the glass. Tears ran down her face, frozen in small lines by the cold, but her expression was one of wonder and gratitude. She looked up at Elias, who stood nearby, his suit scratched and dusted with snow. His breath came out in clouds inside the he. Thummet, but he smiled faintly, tired but satisfied. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside this small space of warmth and light, life had returned. The mother and her child were safe, and the human had kept his promise. For the first time in days, Sierra felt hope. The storm could howl all it wanted, but they had survived it together. Elias looked out at the snow, then back at them. He knew the journey was not over. They still had to leave this world to find a place where the baby could grow and thrive. But for now, in this small moment, they had won. The lullaby that had once been a song of farewell had become a song of survival. And somewhere deep inside, all three of them felt it. A promise that life could continue even in the harshest storm. Inside the ship, warmth wrapped around them like a soft blanket. The storm outside still raged, but within the small cabin, life had returned. The baby slept peacefully inside the warming pod, tiny hands twitching slightly as if dreaming of sunlight and soft winds. Sierra sat close, her arms wrapped around herself, still shivering but slowly regaining strength. Her eyes never left her child, and each gentle sigh brought relief to her tired heart. Elias moved carefully around the cabin, checking the ship's systems and ensuring that the heat was steady. He had set the engines to automatic stabilization, so the ship would not be tossed by the storm outside. Every sensor reading showed that the child's vitals were improving. Sierra noticed the way he watched them, not as a stranger but as someone who truly cared. It was a new feeling for her, trust in another being. She tried to speak, forming sounds she did not expect him to understand. The words were soft, broken, yet filled with gratitude. Elias tilted his head slightly, listening with a calm patience. Though he could not translate her language, he understood the meaning through her tone, through the way her eyes glistened with tears. He nodded gently, a small gesture that told her everything would be okay. The ship shook slightly as the storm gusted outside, but Elias adjusted the shields. He motioned for Sierra to follow him to a small seating area. She hesitated at first, but the warmth of the cabin drew her forward. Her steps were slow and careful, her body still weak from the cold. He guided her gently, using gestures and soft words. Once seated, she placed her hands on the pod again, watching the baby sleep, and finally allowed herself a small moment to breathe. Elias retrieved a small container from his pack, filled with nutrient gel and water. He offered it to Sierra, gesturing with his hands. She looked at it uncertainly at first, then slowly accepted it. The taste was strange but sweet, and warmth spread through her body almost immediately. She felt her energy returning, each sip giving her a little more strength to stand and care for her child. The baby stirred once, opening one tiny eye and looking at the glowing lights of the pod. Elias reached out slowly, his gloved hand hovering above the small being. The child did not flinch, only blinked curiously. It was a delicate moment, fragile and full of trust. Sierra watched this silently, her heart swelling with relief. The bond forming between the human and her baby was strange but somehow comforting. Hours passed, and the storm outside began to show signs of fading. Through the thick windows of the ship, faint light broke through the clouds. Elias looked at the scanner readings again. The baby's vitals were strong now, steady and warm. Sierra's hands rested on her knees, and she let herself feel hope for the first time in days. She did not know where the human had come from or why he had chosen to help her, but she no longer questioned it. He was here, and that was enough. She began to hum her lullaby softly again, a gentle song that filled the small cabin with warmth and comfort. Elias paused to listen. Though he could not understand the words, the melody spoke clearly. It was a song of love, of protection, of survival against impossible odds. He nodded silently, knowing that the song itself was a promise. They would endure. The ship's engines hummed steadily as it prepared to lift off from the icy planet below. Elias approached Sierra, making gentle gestures to reassure her that they would leave the storm behind. She touched the pod, whispering softly to her child, and then looked up at him with eyes that held both fear and trust. He understood completely. He would carry them through the storm and into safety. As the ship lifted, the cabin filled with light from the rising sun outside the frozen clouds. The storm's fury had not yet disappeared, but its power no longer mattered. Inside, they were safe, warm, and together. Sierra pressed her hands to her child's small body, feeling the steady heartbeat and the rise and fall of tiny breaths. It was enough to restore her spirit. Elias guided the ship carefully through the remaining storm, keeping a steady course toward warmer regions. He glanced back at Sierra and her child, noting how she now leaned back, her body relaxing as the warmth spread through her. The baby cooed softly, tiny hands reaching out instinctively. Elias smiled under his helmet. This was why he traveled the stars. To protect, to save, to witness life endure against impossible odds. Sierra's lullaby continued, stronger now, filled with gratitude and new hope. The song wrapped around them, a quiet comfort in the midst of uncertainty. Though they did not speak the same language, the meaning was clear. They were alive together and safe for now, and that was enough. The storm outside continued, but inside the ship a small family had found warmth, care, and trust. The alien mother, her child, and the human who had arrived through the snow had become something more than strangers. They were a team united by survival, hope, and the quiet strength that comes when life refuses to give up. For the first time in many days, all three could feel it. The storm had not won. They had. The ship moved steadily through the fading storm, leaving the frozen plains behind. Outside, snow still swirled in sheets, but inside the cabin was warm and calm. Sierra sat close to her child, her fingers brushing the baby's tiny hands. Each movement was careful, protective. She had been so weak before, so filled with fear, but now she felt a strength she had not known she possessed. The warmth of the cabin, the safety of the ship, and the presence of the human who had saved them had given her courage. Elias moved around the cabin quietly, checking the ship's systems. Every reading showed that the baby was stable, even thriving in the gentle warmth of the pod. The mother's vitals were returning to normal, her breathing deepening with each passing minute. He glanced at them and allowed himself a small smile. The storm had tested them, but they had endured. Sierra looked at Elias, unsure how to express the depth of her gratitude. Words would not do. Their languages were too different, too distant, so she simply reached out, touching his gloved hand gently. The gesture was simple, but the meaning was clear. Thank you for life, for hope, for warmth. Elias nodded slightly, understanding completely. No words were needed. The baby stirred again, small hands stretching toward the light of the pod. Sierra's heart tightened with love. She had sung lullabies in a cave, uncertain if her child would survive the night. Now, seeing the baby awake and alert, she felt a joy she thought she would never feel again. Elias crouched near the pod, watching carefully, making sure not to startle the child. His presence was steady, protective, and silent, a reassuring anchor for both mother and child. Hours passed as the ship glided through the clouds. Outside, the storm began to break, revealing distant mountains dusted with snow and valleys catching the first light of a hidden sun. Sierra's eyes widened at the sight, a small smile breaking across her face. It was the first beauty she had seen in many days. Her people's songs had always celebrated light and life, and now she could see them again, even if only from a distance. Elias noticed the change in her expression. He had flown through many dangerous worlds, seen countless storms, and faced death more times than he could count. Yet seeing a mother regain hope, seeing life return to a fragile child, and it gave him a sense of purpose beyond survival or duty. He allowed himself a moment to simply watch them, silent and steady, grateful that he had arrived in time. Sierra began to hum again, her lullaby soft and low, filling the cabin with warmth beyond the heater's reach. This time it was different. It was not a song of fear or farewell, but a song of strength and survival. The baby listened, cooing softly, and Elias felt the harmony of life around him. Though they could not speak to each other, the connection between them was complete. It was trust, protection, and hope combined into a single shared understanding. The ship descended slowly toward a safer region of the planet, a place where warmth and shelter were more abundant. Elias had studied the terrain from orbit and chosen a location that could support them until recovery crews arrived. He adjusted the ship's thrusters carefully, avoiding frozen ridges and deep drifts. The storm might rage outside, but the landing zone promised stability, and they would finally have a chance to rest. Sierra watched the controls with fascination, curious about the human skills. She did not understand the ship, the instruments, or the strange glowing panels, but she could feel the confidence and care in his movements. Each adjustment he made was precise, each decision guided by thoughtfulness and experience. She realized that this human was not only strong but wise, a protector not just of life but of hope itself. Finally, the ship touched down on a plateau above a small valley, where the snow was lighter and the winds gentler. Elias activated the ship's landing stabilizers and carefully opened a side hatch. Cold air from outside brushed the cabin, but it was nothing like the blizzard they had escaped. He gestured for Sira to prepare to move toward the exit. She gathered the baby, holding it securely, and followed his lead. As they stepped outside, the sunlight, though dim, felt warm against their faces. Snow crunched beneath their feet, but it was manageable. The valley below stretched wide and open, a place where life might yet endure. Sira looked around in wonder, her heart swelling with hope. Her baby would have a chance to grow here, to see the sky, to feel warmth and safety. Elias stood close, supporting them both. His eyes scanned the area for danger, but he allowed himself a brief smile. They had survived the storm, crossed impossible odds, and now stood on the edge of a new beginning. Sira whispered softly to her child, humming the lullaby again, and the baby cooed in response. In that moment, the harsh world outside seemed distant, almost unreal. The human, the alien mother, and her child had faced the storm together and emerged stronger. Though their worlds were different, though their languages were impossible to share, their bond was unbreakable. They had discovered that courage, kindness, and hope could cross any barrier. And as the sun's pale light spread across the valley, Sira realized something profound. No matter how dark the storm, life would always find a way. The valley stretched before them, quiet and calm after the storm. The snow glimmered faintly under the weak sunlight, sparkling like tiny crystals scattered across the land. Sira knelt beside her baby, gently brushing snow from its small face. The child's eyes blinked open, bright and curious, taking in the light for the first time since the storm had begun. Her heart swelled with relief. They had survived, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to believe they could be safe. Elias stood nearby, scanning the horizon with careful eyes. His suit, still lightly dusted with snow, reflected the pale sunlight. He had led them through one of the harshest storms he had ever faced, yet he felt a quiet satisfaction. It was not a victory of power or skill, but a victory of life, of survival against impossible odds. He watched Sira and the baby, noting the small signs of recovery. The baby's fingers curling, a weak coo escaping its lips, Sira's soft hum rising again like a gentle wind. Sira looked up at him and offered a faint, grateful smile. Words were unnecessary. Their bond went beyond language. She touched her chest softly, then gestured toward the sky, trying to convey the depth of her thanks. Elias nodded gently. The meaning was clear. Life had been saved, hope had returned, and this small family could endure. He motioned for her to follow him toward the ship, which rested safely on the plateau above the valley. Sira lifted the baby carefully, wrapping it in the protective blanket from the pod. Its warmth seeped into her arms, steady and reassuring. Together they walked slowly but steadily toward the hatch. The crunch of snow underfoot was soft and calming, a stark contrast to the violent storm that had nearly claimed them. Inside the ship, the cabin was warm and welcoming. The heaters hummed softly, and the lights cast a comforting glow over the small interior. Elias guided Sira to a secure seat while keeping an eye on the valley outside. The baby rested in its pod, eyes closing again in contentment. Sira's hands hovered over the pod, protective yet relaxed, as if finally able to breathe without fear. Hours passed quietly. Sira hummed her lullaby again, this time with a calm certainty, filling the cabin with warmth that went beyond the heaters. The song was no longer one of fear, but of life, love, and endurance. The baby stirred slightly, reaching toward her mother's voice. Elias watched the scene in silence, realizing that the lullaby, the small gestures of care, and the shared silence had created a bond stronger than any language could express. The storm outside had moved on, leaving behind a world that was still harsh but alive. In the distance, faint green patches hinted at vegetation beneath the snow. Sira gazed out the window, imagining the days ahead for her child, running across open fields, feeling the warmth of sunlight, and growing strong in a world that still had beauty to offer. She allowed herself a small, hopeful smile, knowing that life, even after devastation, could endure. Elias prepared the ship for departure from the plateau, carefully adjusting controls for a steady ascent. Sierra watched him, realizing that he was not just a rescuer but a protector in the truest sense. He had risked his own safety to ensure they survived. She could feel the quiet strength in him, the calm determination that had guided them through the storm. In his presence, fear had no place. Only trust and gratitude remained. The ship lifted smoothly, leaving the snow-covered valley behind. From above, the world looked harsh and endless, but from within, the cabin was filled with warmth, life, and hope. The baby's soft coos echoed faintly, harmonizing with Sierra's lullaby. Elias glanced at them and allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. Across the stars, humans had always sought life. But moments like this, when life was fragile, precious, and saved against impossible odds, reminded him why the effort was worth everything. Sierra held her child close, whispering softly, continuing the lullaby with words that transcended any language barrier. Elias watched, knowing that the song carried a promise. The promise of survival, care, and hope that would endure no matter what storms lay ahead. The baby stirred again, tiny hands reaching toward the warmth of its mother, and Sierra smiled through her tears. Life had returned to them, fragile but unbroken. As the ship flew toward safer lands, the first real warmth of the sun touched the icy surface below. Snow melted into streams, and the valley slowly revealed life hidden beneath its white cloak. The world outside was still challenging, but inside the cabin life had found its victory. Sierra looked at Elias once more, her eyes shining with gratitude and awe. She did not need to speak. The gesture, the song, and the shared silence told the story of survival more clearly than words ever could. And in that moment, through the storm they had endured and the challenges they had faced, a new day began for the mother, her child, and the human who had arrived through the snow. The lullaby that had once been a farewell had become a song of life. Together, they had turned fear into hope, darkness into light, and a frozen world into a place where the promise of tomorrow could finally take root. Life had endured, and in the warmth of the cabin they all knew it. The storm had passed and a new beginning had begun.